Lily's Blue Haven. Lily Bloom sipped her Earl Grey, the steam fogging her glasses as she watched a cardinal flit between the branches of her crabapple tree. From her living room window, the world was a watercolor of soft greens and gentle blues. The blue, of course, was mostly her doing. Lily's Blue Haven, as she jokingly named her house in her head, was painted a shade of cerulean that clashed spectacularly with the beige monotony of the rest of the development. She smiled, adjusting her glasses. The HOA had sent her letters, of course, passive-aggressive missives threatening fines and demanding conformity. But Lily had simply ignored them. It was her house, her little patch of sunshine in a world that often felt too gray. Outside, nestled amongst the roses and petunias, were her gnomes. Not the pristine, mass-produced kind you found at big box stores. Lily's gnomes were a motley crew, each one rescued from flea markets and antique shops. There was Barnaby, the fisherman, perpetually tangled in a fishing line, Gertrude, the gardener, whose paint was chipped from years of sun exposure, and Bartholomew, the sleepy gnome, always leaning against a mushroom with a blissful expression. She'd arranged them with care, each gnome in a place of honor. Gertrude oversaw the herb garden, Barnaby guarded the miniature koi pond, and Bartholomew, well, Bartholomew just slept. But Lily liked having him there, a reminder to slow down and appreciate the quiet moments. A shadow fell across the window. Lily's breath hitched. It couldn't be, could it? Had Karen actually come back? Lily peered through the glass, her heart pounding. It wasn't Karen, but a uniformed police officer stood on her porch, holding a clipboard. Lily's stomach plummeted. This was not good. Not good at all. The glare of Mrs. Crabtree. Lily sipped her Earl Grey, the steam a gentle caress against her cheek. From her porch swing, she surveyed her garden. Petunias in riotous colors spilled from mismatched teacups, their sugary scent mingling with the earthy aroma of damp soil. Gnomes, each with a distinct personality, or at least, Lily imagined they did, stood guard amongst the blooms. She knew a storm was brewing, and not the meteorological kind. Across the street, a sprinkler hissed, painting an arc of water across Agnes Crabtree's meticulously manicured lawn. Agnes, a woman whose face perpetually resembled a pinched lemon, was watering already drenched grass, her movements stiff and purposeful. But it wasn't the water she was focused on. Agnes's eyes, narrowed to slits, were fixed on Lily's house, radiating a palpable disapproval. Lily chuckled softly, remembering the last HOA meeting. And those gnomes. Agnes had sputtered, her voice a shrill whine that scraped against Lily's eardrums. They're unsightly. They lower property values. A chorus of weak agreement had followed, mostly from residents terrified of incurring Agnes's wrath. Agnes turned off the sprinkler with a decisive click. The glare intensified, a laser beam of pure, unadulterated animosity. Lily knew what was coming. The march across the street, the carefully rehearsed complaints, the thinly veiled threats. She took another sip of her tea, a faint smile playing on her lips. Let the games begin. A crash heard, round the block. Lily savored the Earl Grey, the steam of fragrant veil between her and the meticulously arranged gnome village in her garden. Agnes Crabtree's car was still parked across the street. Lily anticipated the inevitable confrontation. Agnes had sent a scathing email about the gnome hats being unsightly and detrimental to property values. Lily was ready. A sound like a thunderclap, impossibly loud, ripped through the peaceful morning. The house shuddered. Lily yelped, scalding tea splashing onto her hand. She shot up, heart hammering, and stumbled towards the source of the cataclysm. Her living room, or what was left of it. Mrs. Crabtree's behemoth SUV was embedded in the front window, shards of glass glinting like malevolent jewels on the hood. The gnome village, once a bastion of whimsical charm, was now a massacre of ceramic limbs and tiny felt hats. Agnes Crabtree sat behind the wheel, eyes wide and face the color of week-old porridge. "Oh, Lily, darling," she stammered, hands fluttering like trapped birds. "The accelerator. It stuck. I swear, it just went completely haywire." Lily stared, speechless. The air hung thick with the scent of shattered glass, burnt rubber, and simmering disbelief. Haywire? An accelerator malfunction that sent her careening across the street and directly into Lily's living room? This was going to be even better than she'd imagined. Blame the gnomes. Lily sipped her chamomile, watching the flashing lights paint her gnome village in alternating hues of red and blue. She'd placed a fresh batch of sugar cookies on a small plate next to her, anticipating company. Specifically, Officer Peterson. And, inevitably, Mrs. Crabtree. The patrol car crunched to a halt on what was left of her flower bed. Officer Peterson, a young man with kind eyes and a perpetually tired expression, unfolded himself from the driver's seat. Mrs. Crabtree emerged from her slightly dented SUV, clutching a floral-printed handkerchief to her chest. "Officer," Lily began, setting down her tea, "Mrs. Crabtree seems to have lost control of her vehicle." She gestured to the gaping hole in her living room wall. Mrs. Crabtree huffed. "Lost control? I was forced to swerve. It was those abominations." She pointed a trembling finger at the gnome village. "They rolled into the street. I had no choice but to avoid them." Officer Peterson blinked, looking from the gnomes, frozen mid-frolic, to the wreckage, then back to Mrs. Crabtree. "Ma'am, are you saying the garden gnomes caused the accident?" "They did," Mrs. Crabtree insisted, her voice rising an octave. "They're a menace. I've told the HOA repeatedly. They're distracting. And now, look what they've done. Ruined my suspension, probably." Lily calmly walked over and offered Officer Peterson a sugar cookie. "Want to hear my side of the story, officer?" She smiled sweetly at Mrs. Crabtree, whose face was rapidly turning the color of a prize-winning beet. "A false accusation." Lily delicately placed her teacup on the saucer, the floral china a stark contrast to the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. Outside, her gnomes stood sentinel, their painted smiles mocking her unease. She'd been expecting a confrontation with Mrs. Crabtree, of course. What she hadn't anticipated was the sterile white envelope that had arrived with the Morning Post. A notice from the police department. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper detailed a police report filed by Agnes Crabtree. Lily scanned the text, her breath catching in her throat. Mrs. Crabtree alleged that Lily had deliberately lured her onto the Bloom property, strategically placing garden ornaments to cause a hazardous obstruction. That Lily had, in effect, orchestrated the entire accident. The audacity of it stung. Lily reread the report, each fabricated detail a fresh wave of disbelief. Mrs. Crabtree claimed Lily had been waving frantically from the porch, beckoning her closer with exaggerated gestures. That the gnomes were positioned like mocking sentries, their ceramic grins an intentional provocation. Lily slammed the paper down on the wrought iron table, the teacup rattling precariously. The injustice of it burned. Not only had Mrs. Crabtree nearly demolished her sunroom, but now she was attempting to twist the narrative, painting Lily as the villain. The gnomes, she thought, deserved hazard pay, facing the consequences. The Earl Grey tasted like ash. Lily stared out the kitchen window, the steam fogging the glass, mirroring the haze in her mind. Sunlight dappled the lawn, illuminating her gnomes in all their ceramic glory. Each pointy hat, each mischievous grin, felt like a tiny act of rebellion now, a flag planted on enemy soil. Mrs. Crabtree's false report. The words echoed in Lily's head. Disorderly conduct. Public nuisance. The official-sounding phrases conjured images of hefty fines, legal battles, and, worst of all, the forced removal of her beloved gnomes. A robin landed on Grumble's head, tilting its own as if in contemplation. Lily sighed. Maybe it was time. Time to pack them away, box them up, and surrender to the tyranny of perfectly manicured lawns and beige conformity. The thought felt like a betrayal. They were more than just garden ornaments. They were symbols of her quirky spirit, her refusal to be defined by the HOA's sterile aesthetic. She imagined the empty spaces between the rose bushes, the bare patches of earth where they once stood guard. The garden would feel wrong, lifeless, like a stage set after the actors had left. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Her stomach tightened. It was probably the police, or worse, Mrs. Crabtree herself, armed with a measuring tape and a self-righteous sneer. Lily set down her teacup, the clink sounding loud in the sudden silence. She straightened her shoulders and walked towards the door, steeling herself for the inevitable confrontation. The gnomes, oblivious, continued to smile. The watchful eye. Lily sipped her tea, the Earl Grey a weak imitation of comfort. Through the kitchen window, the garden gnomes stood frozen in their painted poses, oblivious to the chaos that had erupted around them. She'd rearranged them just yesterday, placing Bartholomew closer to the bird bath. Now, the bird bath was rubble, and Bartholomew was probably cowering under a displaced paving stone. Her phone buzzed. "Dad." She hesitated, then answered. "Hey, sweetie. I heard about the accident." His voice was tight with worry. "Accident is one word for it," Lily muttered, picturing Karen's SUV embedded in her living room wall. Are you hurt? Should I come down? I'm fine, Dad. Really? Just dealing with it. She forced a lightness she didn't feel. Thanks for calling. After hanging up, Lily stared at the dark screen. Dad, always so protective. Then it hit her. Protective and paranoid. When he'd visited last month, he'd insisted on installing those new security cameras. Said it was for peace of mind. She thought it was overkill, a little much for a quiet cul-de-sac. Now those cameras might be the only witnesses she had. Lily abandoned her tea, the clink of the ceramic cup against the counter echoing in the suddenly silent house. She raced to the spare bedroom, the one Dad had temporarily commandeered as his tech hub. The monitors sat on the desk, dark and accusing. Her fingers fumbled with the power button. Come on, come on. The screen flickered to life, displaying 4 quadrants, each showing a different angle of her property. Lily held her breath, fast-forwarding through the morning's footage. There, a silver blur. Karen's SUV, hurtling across the lawn, a deliberate trajectory of destruction. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. It was all there. Truth revealed. Lily swirled the chamomile tea in her favorite mug, the one with the chipped gnome on the handle. From the kitchen window, she surveyed her garden. The remaining gnomes stood stoically, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded around them. A robin pecked at the overturned earth near where Agnes, the gnome with the fishing rod, used to stand. A nervous flutter danced in Lily's stomach. Today was the day. Today, the truth came out. The doorbell chimed, a crisp, formal sound that echoed the gravity of the situation. Her dad stood on the porch, his face etched with a mixture of worry and determination. He carried a slim laptop case. In the living room, the air crackled with unspoken tension. Her dad set up the laptop, connecting it to the television for a larger view. The security system's interface blinked onto the screen. He navigated to the day of the incident, his movements precise and deliberate. Ready? He asked, his voice low. Lily nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The footage began. The scene was ordinary, a sunny afternoon, birds chirping, leaves rustling. Then, a blur of red. Mrs. Crabtree's SUV careened into view, its speed visibly excessive. There was no swerving to avoid gnomes, no attempt to brake. The SUV slammed directly into the corner of Lily's house, a sickening crunch of metal and splintering wood. Lily watched, mesmerized, as the truth unfolded on the screen. The gnomes remained untouched, scattered innocently in their designated spots, far from the path of destruction. The evidence was undeniable. Well, her dad said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. That's that. Justice and harmony glade. Lily sipped chamomile, the floral scent doing little to soothe the knot in her stomach. From her porch swing, she watched her gnome village, now sadly diminished, and waited. The crunch of gravel announced Officer Peterson's arrival. Morning, Lily. Mrs. Crabtree's here too. Peterson gestured to Agnes, who stood stiffly by his patrol car, her face a roadmap of disapproval. Lily led them inside, gesturing to the laptop on the kitchen table. Officer, I've compiled security footage from the night of the incident. She clicked play. The video showed Mrs. Crabtree's SUV careening across the lawn, smashing directly into Lily's house. Agnes gasped, a sound like a deflating balloon. It was an accident. Agnes sputtered, her face reddening. I told you, I lost control. Peterson raised an eyebrow. Lost control right into her house, ma'am? Seems a bit targeted for an accident. He turned to Agnes. Ma'am, you're going to need to make things right. Agnes, defeated, finally spoke. Fine. I'll pay for the damages. And I apologize, Lily, for everything. The words seemed to physically pain her to utter. Weeks later, the hammering had ceased. The scent of fresh paint replaced the musty odor of damp drywall. Lily stood back, admiring the vibrant blue that once again adorned her home. The paint glistened in the afternoon sun. One by one, she carefully placed her gnomes back in their rightful spots, each with a silent welcome home. Harmony Glade, or at least her corner of it, felt harmonious again.